following is a production of Cary TV, the Town of Cary's government access channel.
Call to order the January 28th meeting of the Cary Town Council. I want to thank you for joining us this evening. We have 6 council members total this evening. Councilmember Laurie Bush is not with us tonight since her mother recently passed, and our thoughts and our prayers are with Laurie and her family at this time as she's going through a mourning period. We also ask that if you're watching this to keep Laurie in your thoughts and prayers. We continue to follow the governor's state of emergency orders as we're streaming this meeting tonight virtually. We all had our temperatures checked before entering the building, and you can see we have adjusted seating arrangements to maintain proper social distancing, and each person has been given hand sanitizer as well as a mask to use as they deem appropriate. The majority of council is present with me here tonight, again socially distanced, and to meet the requirement of the remote meetings law, we have our Mayor Pro Tem participating remotely through WebEx. Mayor Pro Tem, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thanks for joining us remotely. So at this time, we'll start with our ceremonial opening, and I'll recognize Councilmember Yalu, who will lead our ceremonial opening.
Thank you, Mayor. Please join me for a Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is to adopt the agenda. There are 2 changes to our agenda this evening. Additional finance update under recognitions, reports, and presentations, and removal of determination of Cary's election filing fees, which will return to council at a future meeting. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. Roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem France.
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Yerha.
Aye.
Councilmember Liu.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
I'm affirmative as well, and we have an adopted agenda. We now move to recognitions, reports, and presentations. And I can't wait to hear the first one, which is Cary 150 History Moment by Mr. Yerha. But before we go there, I just want to mention something pretty spectacular. We have a town employee who, and we've been debating the number, 44, 45 years served at the town of Cary, Sammy Garris. And is tomorrow his last day?
I'm not certain if it's the last day, but I believe that it is, yes.
But that's an incredible feat. No Cary employee has ever served citizens of Cary that long. And Sammy can't be here because this is a remote meeting, but I would like to lead a round of applause. And when we can have in-person meetings, we're going to recognize him. So let's thank Sammy for a minute. Thank you, Sammy, for all you've done. In his route in Public Works, he had people with signs and balloons and all sorts of stuff. So he is very much loved at the town of Cary, and we're going to miss him. All right, now moving to our scheduled first recognition report and presentation, we'll recognize Councilmember Ed Urha.
Thank you, Mayor. From time to time during this year, we'll be adding a few brief moments of Cary history to our council meetings, and I hope you enjoy them. Tonight's topic is Cary becomes a town. How did that happen, and why are we talking about it this year? You'll notice the Cary 150 logo, something that you're going to see often this year, because Cary's official date of incorporation was April 3rd, 1871. So if you do the math, April 3rd this year will be Cary's 150th anniversary as a town. An easy way to remember April 3rd, 2021 is 4321. Kind of neat. But no matter how you express it, it's time to say happy birthday to Cary. Incorporating was the thing to do in those days. After all, the region was growing very fast. There were about a whopping 200 people living in the Cary area at that time, 200 people. And you see here various incorporations around that same time. You see Durham and Clayton beat us by a couple years. In trailing us just by a few years is Apex in 73, Morrisville and Youngsville following, Holly Springs and Wake Forest, all within a few years. And this is just a partial list. There are more. The person behind Cary's incorporation 150 years ago was none other than Jack Smith. That's not correct. Jack was not around 150 years ago. Almost, but not quite. Actually, in Cary, when it came to incorporating, Allison Francis Page, better known as Frank, was the guy to do it. Frank and his wonderful wife, Kate, raised their 8 children right here. And when I say right here, I mean literally right here, because the Page homestead, pictured on the right, stood on what would later become our town hall campus. And it stood right here for over 100 years until 1970, when it was sadly destroyed by fire. The only remnant of the Page homestead still standing is the smokehouse in the Ann B. Kratzer Gardens at the Page Walker Arts and History Center. And I encourage everybody to stop by downtown and visit it during this anniversary year. When Frank and Kate moved here, they bought 300 acres, and Frank started a lumber mill. Soon he subdivided those 300 acres, becoming Cary's first developer. He then talked some of his Raleigh friends into moving here, thus becoming Cary's first real estate agent. Using his lumber mill, he built the houses for his new residents, thus becoming Cary's first builder. He supplied their daily needs with his new dry goods store, becoming Cary's premier retailer. He also helped organize Cary's First Methodist Church, which happens to be celebrating its 150th anniversary as well this year, so we say happy anniversary to them. He established Cary's first school, the original Cary Academy. He was Cary's first postmaster, and of course, he was Cary's first mayor. In other words, Frank had it all covered. So the new town that was about to be incorporated had to be called, what else, but Page, North Carolina. Not a bad name, and a very obvious choice, and it even fit on our street signs. But not so fast. The temperance movement was in full swing around the United States. Its mission was to prohibit alcoholic beverages, prohibition. And Frank was in full support. Yes, alas, Frank was a teetotaler. He also frowned upon dancing, gambling, and, well, that's a story for another time.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
One of the leaders nationally of the temperance movement was Samuel Fenton Cary, a former congressman and future vice presidential candidate from Ohio. He traveled around the country by train and spoke to crowds gathered to hear his golden oratory. In February of 1871, less than 2 months before Cary's incorporation, Sam visited Raleigh, where he became very popular. Why is this? Well, we don't know, but perhaps because he had been only one of just 2 Republicans in Congress to vote against the impeachment of Andrew Johnson. Why was this important? Well, Andrew Johnson was born in Raleigh, and he still had some old family friends and acquaintances living here, so they were sympathetic to his plight. But whatever the reason, Frank was inspired. He greatly admired Sam, and Cary was to be the name of his new town. So he filed the necessary paperwork in Raleigh, and you'd think that would be it, but it wasn't all that easy. Perhaps it wasn't easy, because just a few days earlier, after a lengthy process, North Carolina Governor W.W. Holden became the first United States governor to himself get impeached and removed from office. Yes, impeachment was in the news 150 years ago. How do you like that? So state government, as a result, was in transition at this time. It wasn't the best time to get any important business done, and it certainly wasn't in this case. For when Frank got the official completed paperwork back, look close, Cary, C-A-R-E-Y. It was spelled wrong. Maps were printed with the E. Signs were made. Newspapers used the E. As you can see, Cary High School even had an E in the middle of its name. Frank was not happy, and it took a while to get it corrected, but of course, being Frank, he got it fixed. And we became C-A-R-Y, Cary. Whether it's with a hashtag or not, I don't know. And whether the town of 200 people in 1871, or 8,000 people in 1971, or the 170,000 plus that we have today, it's still the town that we all fondly call home. In conclusion, I'd like to recognize the authors of Around and About Cary, Tom Bird and Jerry Miller, the Friends of the Page Walker, the Page Walker Arts and History Center staff, and our Cary clerk extraordinaire, Virginia Johnson, all of whom helped with these history presentations. The picture you see there behind the C-A-R-Y is a pre-COVID picture. That's why we're not wearing masks. It's a pre-COVID picture of the Cary 150 Task Force, along with some of the staff working on the sesquicentennial plans. To learn more about these plans, starting tomorrow, you can check out the Cary 150 website. It'll be Cary150, Cary150.org, Cary150.org, and it'll have a lot of information for you as to what's going on in the course of the year. But for tonight, that's it, and I thank you for listening.
Thanks, Ed. So the website's up tomorrow, not tonight, because I was going to go home and check it out. Tomorrow,
It's
got
supposed
it.
to be tomorrow.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it. We now are at our second presentation, the financial update from Chief Finance Officer Karen Mills. Ms. Mills.
Good evening, Council. In addition to our quarterly financial updates, we've added monthly updates to keep you and our citizens informed on the impact of the pandemic on our budget. Tonight, I'll focus on sales taxes and the pandemic grant revenues. I'll also touch briefly on the financial assistance that's been provided to some of our utility customers to help with their utility bills, and then wrap up with updated revenue budget dashboard. We continue to focus on sales tax revenues because of the variability in sales tax relative to the economy. Sales tax revenues comprise a meaningful 16% of our general fund operating revenue budget, and it's our second largest source of revenue for the general fund, which supports important core services for our citizens. As you know, we receive the Cary share of sales tax revenues 2.5 months after taxes are paid at the register. This month, we learned about sales taxes paid in October, and they were just slightly higher than the prior year. This brings Cary's year-to-date sales tax revenue up $800,000, or 6% higher than last year. We didn't know what to expect from the economy almost a year ago when we were preparing this budget, so we planned very carefully to avoid any mid-year budget cuts that would reduce our citizen services. So this revenue is exceeding our budget. At the same time, our parks program revenues have not returned because we have prioritized safety over public gatherings. The growth in sales tax revenues will help offset other revenue shortfalls, including occupancy tax revenue generated by hotel stays. We are also expecting to come in just under budget on interest income because the interest rate markets have fallen even further over the last year. Shifting to pandemic-specific intergovernmental grants, we have some good news on reimbursements for our pandemic-related expenditures, such as additional payroll, personal protective equipment, disinfection services, and facility modifications. In December, I reported that we were expecting $5.2 million in cost reimbursements from CARES Act money through Wake County, Chatham County, and the Federal Transit Authority. Wake County has indicated that they intended to reimburse Cary for additional expenditures, and we're also working on Federal Emergency Management Agency applications for almost $800,000. This would bring our total reimbursements to $6.2 million for the pandemic. We locked in $2.4 million of these funds in FY 2020, and I got fantastic news just 2 hours ago that Wake County sent us another $2.8 million that this afternoon that we'll book for FY 2021. The last $800,000 from FEMA could take years to receive based on our past experience with FEMA emergency grants. Now I'd like to turn the focus on the pandemic from Cary's overall perspective towards that of some of our hardest hit utility ratepayers. As you know, we have waived utility account late fees and disconnections since last March for non-payment during these difficult times. In August, we established 12-month no-interest payment plans for accounts that were delinquent at that time, and we had planned to restart collection efforts this month. But in December, it was clear that safety restrictions would be ongoing, and so our collections are still on pause. In the meantime, citizens in over 200 single-family residences in Cary and Morrisville have received financial assistance through Wake County's Wake Helps Utility Assistance Program and our own OASIS program. In addition, we had a nice surprise during the holidays and received a $5,000 grant from the Gordon Foundation to share 50 increments of $100 each. We were able to identify a population of accounts in our 311 database that had reached out to us and indicated the need for assistance. From that list, we randomly selected 50 accounts to benefit from this generous gift from a Cary Family Foundation. Unfortunately, there are more than 2,000 accounts that are delinquent now, with a total outstanding balance that's less than 2% of our total annual utility revenue. A staff team is working on additional ways to help these citizens and businesses with financial hardships. At the same time, relative to many other utilities, Cary remains fortunate that less than 5% of the number of our accounts are delinquent. So let's go back to the big picture. This dashboard summarizes the status of our revenues versus budget. And this month, the dashboard includes a new line item for interest income. As I mentioned earlier, it's become clear that rates are not going back up anytime soon. In total, Cary's general fund financial position remains solid, and the positive trends are on track to outpace any revenue budget shortfalls. As for the utility fund, we're closely monitoring water and sewer revenue because we had decreased irrigation demand during a wet fall, and we were experiencing continued lower demand from commercial buildings while many employees work from home. This revenue line item literally changes with the weather, but the financial position and the budget for the utility fund has been designed to bear this volatility, so like the general fund, the utility position is solid. I want to thank you for your ongoing focus and attention to Cary's financials throughout this pandemic. Your attention is a key part of Cary's successful financial management. In February, we'll have another monthly financial update, and you'll receive the quarterly report with more details. Staff is hard at work on the FY22 budget now, and we'll plan to share that recommended budget with you in May. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Ms. Mills? I think you guys are doing an awesome job all through the pandemic. Thank you so much.
Mayor, if we could,
Thank
I just
you.
want to thank the county again. The county has been
Yeah.
just demonstrated such leadership and just a sense of community amongst the other communities in Wake County, and really in stark contrast to so many other of the larger counties in North Carolina. And so really appreciate that.
It's a good point. I met with the chair of the commissioners along with all the other mayors, and it was like a no-brainer for them. So they really care about their municipalities.
Yeah.
And I thank them on behalf of all of us. And it's great that they do care. Okay, anything else before we move on? All right, we'll move now to Public Speaks Out. Instructions for submitting comments for Public Speaks Out were attached to the posted agenda, and participants had the opportunity to send comments through email, the 311 online portal, and regular mail. It now is the time for Public Speaks Out, so I'll open up Public Speaks Out and call on the town clerk to summarize the one comment she received. Ms. Johnson.
Yes, we received one comment from Tony Orr. He shared his opposition to building of any structure in Cary.
Okay. So that being the only comment, I'll close the Public Speaks Out and we'll move on to our next item. Our next item is the consent agenda. If you're following along at home, that's item 4. For the benefit of benefit of the people watching our meeting on TV, I'm going to take a moment to review the consent agenda items. Please keep in mind that one vote approves all of these items. On the consent agenda, we have minutes, consideration of withdrawing the offer of dedication of right-of-way, an open portion of Maitenview Lane. Would council members like either of these items pull for discussion? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. Roll call vote. Mayor Pro Tem France.
Aye.
Councilmember Robinson.
Aye.
Councilmember Yerha.
Aye.
Councilmember Lou.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Aye.
I vote affirmative, and the consent agenda is approved unanimously, which takes us to our public hearings. Same rules apply for public hearings, except for one change. Speakers now have 5 minutes instead of 3. Instructions for submitting comments for the public hearings were also included in the public hearing notice. Participants had the opportunity to send comments through email, 311 online portal, regular mail. All comments received before noon today were emailed to the council, and a printed copy was given to council at tonight's meeting. Our first public hearing is 19 REZ 29, Lily Atkins rezoning, and Principal Planner Katie Dry will introduce the item. Council will not take action on this rezoning tonight, but it will be referred to our Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation, and the item will return to us at a future date. Ms. Dry.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a request to apply initial zoning to properties near the intersection of Lily Atkins Road and Holly Springs Road. This case was originally scheduled for a public hearing in September of 2020, but was since removed from the agenda at the applicant's request. Since that time, the applicant has worked with Cary staff to review a voluntary traffic study for this site. Because the site is not currently in Cary's corporate limits or within the ETJ, there is an owner-initiated annexation with this request. And although a public hearing for the annexation will occur at a later date, I'd like to take a moment to preview the annexation. The assemblage of properties for the Lily Atkins rezoning are shown here in pink, and although this looks like a satellite annexation, it is not, because there is state-owned property between the site and the corporate limits. The state-owned property, which is shown here in green, is known as intervening property, which can be used to become contiguous. This is not an uncommon practice, and it is a standard part of annexations. However, we more frequently see intervening property with state-owned right-of-way. Therefore, if the Town Council agrees to annex and apply initial zoning to the Lily Atkins properties, then the parcel owned by NCDOT will be automatically annexed as provided by state law. Zoning would also need to be applied to this property, but that would occur at a later date. We also note that if ultimately the Lily Atkins rezoning does not move forward, the annexation of the site as well as the NCDOT parcel would also not move forward. The Lily Atkins rezoning is an assemblage of 5 parcels. Each property ranges in size between 5 to 10 acres. 4 of the properties are part of the Woodhaven subdivision, which was subdivided under Wake County in 1977. The assemblage does not include this 5-acre parcel at the intersection of Holly Springs Road and Lily Atkins Road, shown here with the star. A portion of the Lily Atkins rezoning site is within floodplain. We also note that the site to the south, owned by NCDOT, is within floodplain as well. We have heard a lot of concerns regarding this issue, so I'd like to turn the presentation over to Matt Flynn, Stormwater Development Manager, to talk further on this topic. And following Mr. Flynn, I will continue with the presentation.
So thank you, Katie. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council, and a belated Happy New Year to each of you. So any development plan that is submitted subsequent to rezoning here would be subject to numerous environmental regulations. To summarize, this would include the town's floodplain and stream buffer protections. The town prohibits new development in floodplains and stream buffers, so right off the bat, a significant portion of these properties are undevelopable and would remain undisturbed. And you can see those areas in the dark green. So these areas are environmentally sensitive, and as a result of our regulations, they will continue to serve in their primary capacity, providing water quality benefit and floodplain storage. I believe it's important to note here that the town requires 100-foot stream buffers on larger channels where the state only requires 50 feet. In addition, the town's rules prohibiting development in floodplain and stream buffers are well above and beyond any federal or state requirements. In the remaining areas that are eligible for development, all new stormwater runoff would be required to be routed to engineered stormwater control measures. These devices provide water quality mitigation to ensure the regulations of both the Swift Creek Land Management Plan and the Neuse River nutrient sensitive water rules are met. These structures are also designed to ensure new development does not create any new or exacerbate any existing downstream flooding issues. To that end, the developer and the design engineer will be required to demonstrate that there will be no water surface elevation rise downstream for the 1, 2, 5, 10, and 100-year storms that could negatively impact our citizens. Council added the additional requirement of mitigating the 100-year storm in November 2019 as a result of recommendations from our citizens who served on the Downtown Stormwater Advisory Board. This is a group who represented a cross-section of our population. It included conservationists, citizens who were impacted by flooding, developers, and regional and national stormwater experts. For reference, again, the state only requires mitigation of the 1-year storm. And finally, this proposal is proposing less than 3 dwelling units per acre as a residential development. As a result, they're subject to our mass grading protection ordinances. This development would not be able to mass grade. Initially, they'd only be able to grade the roads and infrastructure related to the stormwater control measures, water lines, sewer lines, and storm drain lines. Individual lots could not be cleared until the time that they receive building permits. The purpose here is to reduce time each individual lot is disturbed, and encourages the developer to add additional vegetation protection. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Katie, and I'll certainly be available to answer any questions you may have after she concludes. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Because the site is located within Wake County, the current zoning is R40W. The proposal for the Lily Atkins rezoning is for transitional residential conditional use, and I'd like to note that it will remain within the Water Protection Overlay District. The applicants are proposing the following conditions be applied to the site. They are limiting the use to detached dwellings and neighborhood recreation. The density is capped at a maximum of 2 units per acre. There will be an age restriction of committing that at least 80% of the dwellings will have a resident that has one person at least 55 or older. Lot sizes will be a minimum of 6,000 square feet. This exceeds the minimum required LDO requirement for the TR zoning district of 5,000 square feet. Another condition is lot area shall not include area within a riparian buffer. This is also above and beyond the requirements. State laws require that the town must count abutting areas within a stream buffer as part of lot area. This condition ensures that the entire lot area will be counted outside of any stream buffers. Side yard setbacks have been increased to a minimum aggregate side yard setback of 9 feet with a minimum of 3 feet on one side. Community gathering space has been proposed as a minimum of 2 acres. This exceeds the minimum required by LDO, which is 5,000 square feet. There's also a proposal for a central community or open space area of 2.25 acres. The applicant has also submitted a concept plan, which is a zoning condition for this site. The concept plan shows general areas for uses, buffers, open space, and site entrances. Area in yellow would allow detached dwellings. The center area in light green would allow for open space. There are 2 community gathering areas totaling 2 acres. 2 full movement access points, one on Lily Atkins and one on Holly Springs Road. We note that approval of these access points will be determined at the time of development plan review. The western and southern portion of the development will remain undeveloped as it is impacted by floodplain, stream buffers, and wetlands. Staff's initial review of the Imagine Cary Community Plan finds that policies from the Live, Engage, Shape, and Move chapters are applicable. The site is located on the edge of the traditional neighborhood designation of the Future Growth Framework map. The Cary Community Plan describes traditional neighborhoods as typified by large master plan communities with some degree of housing mix, although single family is a predominant use. Traditional neighborhoods may have small or moderate amounts of other housing types, such as small lot single family homes, patio homes, townhouses, and multifamily housing. But these generally tend to be sited in discrete pods or sections of a master plan development. The applicant's proposing to offset the smaller lot size by establishing a maximum density of 2 units per acre, which could yield up to 76 lots. The traditional neighborhood designation envisions that small lot single-family uses could be allowed in moderate amounts, but also notes that they tend to be in discrete pods or sections. It is unclear if the subject site meets the intent of a discrete pod. The assemblage of properties does not include the 5-acre property at the intersection of Lily Atkins Road and Holly Springs Road, or the 2 lots directly to the west along Lily Atkins Road. According to the Live chapter, Policy 2 speaks to the provision of more housing choices for all residents. Specifically, it talks about accommodating a diverse mix of households, sizes, and ages, encouraging adequate supply of housing suitable for Cary's growing diversity of household types. We note that the proposed zoning condition for age restriction will help to address the policy guidance on senior populations. The Swift Creek Greenway corridor is located along the western and southern portion of the site. The Greenway corridor extends south from Lily Atkins Road to a proposed grade-separated crossing on Holly Springs Road. The dedication of the Greenway easement to facilitate the construction of the Greenway will be required at the time of development plan review. According to the MOVE chapter, Lily Atkins Road is a 2-lane median divided thoroughfare. Holly Springs Road is a 6-lane median divided thoroughfare. The proposed rezoning is anticipated to generate approximately 33 a.m. and 39 p.m. peak hour trips. The threshold for a traffic study is at 100 peak hour trips, and therefore a traffic study is not required by the LDO. However, the applicant voluntarily completed a traffic analysis to help address traffic-related questions and concerns. And upon seeking staff's review, the analysis was revised in October of 2020, and it includes the following findings. First, it notes that traffic is not expected to degrade, or site traffic, is not expected to degrade the level of service on Holly Springs Road and Lily Atkins at the intersection. It notes that turn lanes into the site at the Holly Springs entrance will allow site traffic to shift out of the through lanes to maintain continuous traffic flow on Holly Springs Road. Staff notes that the applicant has not yet committed to the turn lanes at the Holly Springs site entrance, but has indicated these conditions will be added as the case moves forward to the Planning and Zoning Board meeting. The existing peak hour congestion on Holly Springs Road is due to existing situations. The traffic study also notes that future projects will ultimately help to improve traffic. This includes the opening of the new NC 540 Triangle Expressway, which is slated to open in 2022, and NCDOT intersection improvement projects on Holly Springs Road and Southeast Cary Parkway, and then Holly Springs Road at Penny Road. There was a neighborhood meeting held for the site in February of 2020, and nearly 100 property owners were in attendance at that meeting. There were questions and concerns expressed about traffic, stormwater and flooding, environmental and wildlife impacts. There were questions about the number of units and whether they would be age restricted. Questions and concerns about cut-through traffic from Holly Springs Road onto Lily Atkins Road. Also questions about the potential for a traffic signal on Holly Springs Road at Lily Atkins Road. Following the neighborhood meeting, the applicant has held 3 additional virtual meetings. And for the public hearing tonight, staff has received 16 direct emails and 4 phone calls. And there was a number of public hearing comments submitted, which I will summarize during the public hearing portion of this case. Notice of the public hearing was mailed to property owners within 800 feet of the subject property. Staff is the boundary for the NCDOT property to the south to ensure that notice was provided above and beyond the requirements. This distance exceeds the minimum mandated by state law and the land development ordinance. This concludes the staff's presentation. The applicant's representative, Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group, is here to speak to the case. Mr. Barron, you can begin.
Thank you, Ms. Dry. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group. Happy to be here tonight on behalf of the owners, as well as Epcon Communities, who is the proposed builder and developer of this site. Here with me tonight, virtually and on the telephone, are Mr. Ed Tang of Withers Ravenel, a firm that's provided engineering and land planning for this development. And also, you will be hearing from Mr. Todd Brooks during the public speaks portion of this hearing. Mr. Brooks is with Dewberry Engineers, and he can provide information associated with the traffic study that's included in your staff report and that was alluded to during Ms. Dry's description. I want to cover a couple of things, and as always, the staff has done a very thorough job of presenting the details associated with the request. I just want to highlight a handful of things, and one is relates to kind of the big picture associated with the use. Second, I'd like to provide a summary of the process that's led us to where we are as of today, starting this process back in 2019. Third, the changes that have been made based upon that process. And then lastly, to talk a little bit about the ongoing concerns associated with a number of issues related to this development, this property in particular, and the area in general. So first, from a big picture standpoint, I do want to impress upon you that Epcon believes, and I share their sentiment, that this is a right use, right location opportunity. This is as a 55-year and up community, as a retirement community located on the periphery of Lockmere, with good access to shopping services over at Crossroads. I don't live far from the site, as a matter of fact, so I'm intimately familiar with this location, its proximity to retail and shopping opportunities. And that having a 55 and up community on the edge of Lockmere really provides and adds to the housing options available for age in place, for folks who maybe, are going to be moving out of Lockmere at some point. They currently have the 4,000 square foot house and are looking for something smaller, but they want to maintain a very high quality. They also want to continue to live in the general area that they have and want to do so amongst a group of similarly situated people. Having a retirement community in this location, we believe, and Epcon believes, is going to be a tremendous asset to folks who live in Lockmere as well as the overall community. And so from a big picture standpoint, we think that this is the right use in the right location. From a process standpoint, as Ms. Dry mentioned, back in February of 2020, we had the town-required neighborhood meeting. There was a lot of attendance at that, which oftentimes is a challenge, but certainly one of the benefits of having meetings like that is well attended is we get a lot of feedback, and we received a lot of feedback at that meeting, really around a handful of issues that Ms. Dry talked about, but really primarily about concerns associated with development of the site and impacts related to traffic and stormwater and flooding. And I'm going to kind of categorize those two together. Following that initial neighborhood meeting, EPCON took it upon themselves to engage Withers Ravenel to study closely the stormwater issues that had been raised, to look closely at the flooding, to make sure that what was going on our site wouldn't be a challenge to the folks around this property, and also to make sure that what would happen on the site wouldn't present challenges to folks who would be living in the community, because obviously that is a concern for EPCON. Additionally, as is noted in your staff report and was mentioned in Ms. Dry's presentation, EPCON took it upon themselves to hire Dewberry to engage in a traffic study. As the staff report notes, the 33 a.m. peak hour trips and the 39 peak hour trips associated with the development of the site is a far cry from the 100 peak hour trips that the town requires for a TAR, but based upon the overwhelming concern that was raised from the community associated with traffic, specifically related to the Lily Atkins and Holly Springs Road intersection, EPCON felt it was important to go ahead and take that extra step and make sure that there wouldn't be an adverse negative impact associated with this development on that intersection. Following engaging in that study, we had 3 community-wide meetings in the early part of the pandemic. It was probably late spring, early summer. I don't have the dates in front of me, but we had 3 community-wide meetings where we presented additional information from Dewberry related to that traffic study, additional information from Withers Ravenel. Mr. Tang presented information associated with the town standards with respect to stormwater, with respect to the floodplains and the floodways, really kind of illuminating exactly what was being developed and trying to dispel any confusion that may exist associated with how development of this site would occur given the existing environmental features that are around the property. The results of those meetings culminated in a number of changes that were made to the conditions. The first is that a condition was added to mandate a 55 and up community. So there's a condition in the zoning case that requires this to be a 55 plus community. Further, the traffic analysis was updated based upon feedback that was provided from the town engineering staff, again, to ensure that there wouldn't be any negative impact at that intersection. And lastly, a concept plan was incorporated into the zoning. And the benefit of the concept plan is it does a number of things. It clearly identifies where the floodways are, where the floodplains are, where the stream buffers are, clearly delineates what's being developed and what's not being developed, and demonstrates that all of the development activity associated with this site is going to occur outside of those environmentally sensitive areas and subject to the town's very stringent stormwater standards. The concept plan also makes clear that the 2 acres of community gathering area is going to be located on the site, which is approximately 20 times what the code would otherwise require. Also demonstrates the 2.25 acres of central open space that's being provided as part of the plan. And so, you know, those changes we felt were an effective way as part of this zoning case to provide additional detail with the zoning case so that we could help educate the general community associated with what was happening, but more importantly, what wasn't happening, because we got a sense based upon that initial public meeting that there was some confusion associated with how development of this property would actually work. However, we continue to understand that there are a number of folks who are concerned with the case, especially as it relates to traffic, density, and stormwater and flooding. On the traffic front, as you'll hear in better fashion from Mr. Brooks shortly, the traffic that's being generated by the site, by this particular use as an age-restricted community, is between 45 to 50% less than would be generated by a typical single-family residential development. And again, this is a 2 unit to the acre site, so it is not a highly dense site. This is a low density site, and as Mr. Flynn noted in his presentation, that corresponding low density results in not having mass grading of the property. And so, you know, we think that the traffic part of this equation that you'll hear about from Mr. Brooks, it clearly resolves itself in favor of a use such as this, if that is a primary concern, and the same is true of density. With respect to stormwater and flooding, in addition to the fact that the town has these very stringent stormwater standards that apply to all development, and this property included, as you probably have heard before on other cases, and you're probably aware, in retirement communities, there are less driver-aged residents. You typically don't have a lot of teenagers with cars the result of that is you have less impervious surface associated with each individual lot. You have less vehicles that are creating runoff that could create problems downstream in terms of environmental problems. And so I would tell you that as we continue to work our way through the case, and we always welcome feedback from the community, that's true in every case, and this case is no exception. We believe that the issues that are being raised that we are hearing the most often on, and that is traffic, density, and stormwater, we believe those issues are actually compelling reasons to want to approve a case of this type, a low-density, high-quality retirement community at the edge of Lochmere. We believe that this makes for a compelling case. And the last point that I want to make before I hand it back off to the staff is that this property has long been a part of the town's urban services plan. That the plan for a while has been that this site would be served by town water and sewer. And so while it's not in the ETJ and it's not in the town's corporate limits, that doesn't change the fact that the plan has been in place for quite some time, that the town would be serving this particular site as a Cary community. And so with that, I will conclude my comments, and we look forward to continuing to work on this process and look forward to the feedback that we will get from each of you. Thank you very much.
Ms. Dry, do you have anything else?
Nothing further from me until the public hearing portion of this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now is the time for the public hearing for 19 REZ 29 Lily Atkins rezoning, and I'll recognize Katie Dry to summarize the comments we received. All comments received before noon today were emailed to council, and a printed copy was given to council at tonight's meeting. Ms. Dry.
Thank you, Mayor. For the public hearing, we received 78 public hearing comments representing 68 households who shared comments opposing this rezoning for the following reasons. 54 of the comments shared concerns regarding traffic. 50 of the comments were concerned about environmental impacts. 52 of the comments specifically noted concerns about preservation of wildlife and wildlife corridors. 50 of the comments noted concerns that development would have a detrimental impact on drinking water. 50 of the comments stated that they had purchased in a rural area and would like to maintain that character. We received 50 comments, 50 portions of the comments noted that they believe that they've been limited to expand their properties due to impervious surface requirements. 50 comments in opposition to Cary annexing outside of Cary's ETJ. 3 comments stating a need for greenways, sidewalks, and pedestrian and bike safety. 2 comments stating that this is in a flood zone. 1 comment that this development is too dense and this is overbuilding. 1 comment that there was concerns over impervious surface. 1 comment with concerns about increased pesticides and fertilizers with additional development. 1 comment stating the area was far too out for a 55 and older community and noted that it should be located closer to downtown Cary next to Cary services. 1 comment stating that they were concerned about construction debris and pollution due to development. 1 comment stating that the development would be too close to Swift Creek and various nature preserves. 1 comment objecting that the town annex the DOT property. We did have one respondent in favor of the project who noted that they appreciated the plan was being proposed for a 55 and older community and had limited density, and they felt that the plans protected the wetlands. This concludes the summary of the public hearing comments we received. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Dry. We have 3 callers?
Correct.
3 callers on the line, and I'll turn it over to the town clerk to call on our first speaker.
Okay, our first speaker is Andy. Andy, if you could give your full name to confirm that you are the correct speaker.
Yes, it's Andy Suville. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, council. Thank you, staff, for allowing me to speak tonight. I will preface my comments to say thank you for the additional information presented tonight, and I'll be as brief as I can. So I am Andy Suville. I'm actually the community manager for the Lochmere Association. And the Lochmere board had asked me tonight to speak on their behalf to make a few comments as already noted a number of times, the particular concern for Lockmere is the expected higher traffic along Lockmere Drive and Lily Atkins. One of the entrances to the Lockmere pool and tennis facilities exits onto Lily Atkins, and we do have a lot of residents walking to this facility, which would be across Lily Atkins, so there is a concern there. Also, given the already high volume of traffic on Holly Springs and the difficulty of exiting onto Holly Springs Road from Lily Atkins, it's more than likely that residents from this proposed development will actually use Lily Atkins to drive down to Lockmere Drive and exit out of the area for that in that direction. And then finally, in addition, as already noted, there are concerns with the loss of natural habitat and environmental impacts, as well as stormwater concerns. As again noted, Swift Creek does run at the back of a number of Lockmere homes, and an increase in stormwater runoff will definitely impact these properties. And that's the end of my comments. Again, thank you very much for all the information tonight and your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Todd. Todd, please give your full name to confirm you're the correct speaker.
Yes, thank you. This is Todd Brooks.
All right, please proceed.
Thank you. Mayor, members of the Town Council, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening concerning the traffic impacts of the proposed development. I am a traffic engineer for Dewberry Engineers Incorporated, the firm that was hired by EPCON Communities to perform a voluntary traffic impact study for the proposed age-restricted housing development. The town's transportation staff, as was noted earlier, has reviewed our technical report, and we've even had 2 virtual meetings with town staff to go over our analysis and findings along the way. I also want to point out that our study is based on pre-pandemic data and traffic counts that we collected March 3rd through 5th, 2020, which is prior to all the stay-at-home orders and shutdowns, so we just got that in time. So even though our analysis and report was compiled during the pandemic, all the analysis, all the data that we use was pre-pandemic. As you've already heard from Jason Barron's presentation, the main finding of our traffic impact study is that traffic generated by the proposed development will have minimal impact on Lily Atkins Road and Holly Springs Road. The small amount of traffic added by the proposed development will produce no change in the peak hour level of service at the intersection of Lily Atkins Road and Holly Springs Road in the expected build-out year of 2025. It will operate at level of service E in 2025 without any development of the site, and it will continue to operate at level of service E after the site traffic is added to the intersection. The small number of vehicles that the site would add to the intersection during peak hours provides additional perspective. The site is expected to add about 4 new vehicles to eastbound Lily Atkins Road approaching Holly Springs Road during the AM peak, and 3 new vehicles approaching the intersection during the PM peak. If you add up all the site traffic expected on all 3 legs of the intersection, there will only be about 10 more vehicles added to the intersection by the site during the AM peak hour, and approximately 13 more cars added to the intersection during the PM peak. The level of service E, as was noted earlier at the intersection of Lily Atkins and Holly Springs, is not due to the traffic volumes on Lily Atkins Road. At 900 vehicles per day, we're currently seeing on Lily Atkins Road, it's far below its 2-lane capacity, so it's not a capacity issue. As pointed out, the level of service that they're experiencing there is the result of having to wait to turn left and find gaps and turn left or right onto Holly Springs Road from Lily Atkins Road. And that's a condition that exists today and will continue to exist regardless of whether the EPCON site is developed. Traffic counts we took on March 3rd through 5th prior to the COVID stay-at-home orders indicate that some of the Lily Atkins motorists may avoid the Holly Springs Road, and I think the previous caller just did note that, and take alternate routes. The count showed that about 2/3 of the traffic currently using Lily Atkins Road travels away from the Holly Springs Road intersection during the AM peak period, and about 55% does that in the PM. And we also observed that on site when we went out there in September, similar behavior, and I think it's reasonable to expect that traffic from the site will adopt similar behavior because of the congestion at the intersection. There are also reasons to believe that traffic volumes on Holly Springs Road will remain at current levels or perhaps even drop between now and the build-out year. According to the NCDOT data, traffic data, the volume on Holly Springs Road has remained a constant 20,000 vehicles per day since 2003, which sounds kind of strange, but it just points to the fact that it's at capacity and people are seeking alternate routes. And our counts confirm that same number. The new NC 540 interchange with Holly Springs Road may siphon off some of that traffic that's traveling up Holly Springs Road to get to the greater freeway network and other roads in the area when it opens in late 2022. Looking long range, both the town of Cary and NCDOT have plans for capacity improvements on Holly Springs Road. The town of Cary community plan shows Holly Springs Road as a future 6-lane thoroughfare, and additional lanes could increase the frequency of gaps and might even lead to a traffic signal at the intersection. NCDOT Project U6217 will improve capacity at 3 major intersections along Holly Springs Road that are causing some of the queuing today. In closing, the traffic generated by EPCON's development as proposed will have little impact on traffic conditions on Willie Atkins Road and on Holly Springs Road. The age-restricted housing will generate about half the traffic that the same number of traditional single-family detached homes would produce. The site will only generate 33 total trips in the AM peak and 39 during the PM peak. And as I stated earlier, adding the site traffic to the intersection of Willie Atkins Road and Holly Springs Road will not degrade the level of service at that intersection when compared to no-build conditions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Our last speaker is Tarek. Would you please confirm you're the correct speaker by giving your full name?
Yes, my name is Tarek El-Shanawi.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and distinguished council members. In regard to rezoning request 19 Res 29 and annexation request 19A 20, we, the people of the town of Cary, trust that the Planning and Zoning Board will find both the annexation request and the rezoning request inconsistent with the Cary Community Plan. In Chapter 1 Foundations, the plan states that as a town, we value protecting nature and the environment. Requesting a rezone of a residential 40 watershed district contradicts this very value, plain and simple. The density of the proposed conditional use zone is 7 times higher than that of the 40,000 square foot minimum required when in the watershed of an existing public drinking water source. It's over 13 times higher than that of the adjacent residential 80 watershed district. So the idea that a concession being offered by the applicant to limit dwellings to 2 per acre is given the required by ordinance. Further, the idea that stormwater will be managed on site is absolutely preposterous. No amount of excavation for a retaining pond or 2.25 acres of open space, as a developer calls, will mitigate the impact of the impervious surface that comes with such a high density development as proposed. To use this space further, per acre claim is even more, unfortunately, self-dealing. Whilst I have no qualms that the live section of the community plan stands to benefit the most, but staff observations have already acknowledged the shocking disparity in lot sizes proposed compared to the proposed development compared to that in the surrounding nearby neighborhoods. So if nature itself wasn't enough to convince you that this was not the right collection of parcels for redevelopment, then the surrounding development, the non-natural landscape, should at least serve as a guide. And it's not that Cary doesn't need more housing or that our people are obstinate or unwilling to change. I've lived in Cary for over 30 years. I attended Henry Adams Elementary School and graduated from Cary High. I remember when Walnut Street, I remember what it was like before sidewalks, let alone additional driving lanes. I've seen the town myself with my own eyes grow leaps and bounds since I was a child. So I've gained the early understanding of why things can't stay the same forever. I know for one, our town wouldn't be as prosperous. Thanks to the smart and measured planning and zoning decisions over the past 30 years, Cary has grown into a beautiful and thriving town. But a new thing is happening today. I can tell you that, a new thing is happening today. We now live in a time when folks don't have to choose to sell their land to fly-by-night developers to realize the American dream. So to the right honorable gentleman and lady, Mr. and Mrs. Foster, to the right honorable lady, Mrs. Vierson, to the right honorable gentleman, Mr. Miller, to the heirs of the right honorable gentleman, Mr. Jesse Clayton Sr., To the right honorable gentleman and lady, Mr. and Mrs. White, and to the right honorable gentleman and lady, Mr. and Mrs. Flythe, I say, we are proud of y'all for your smart real estate investment decisions. But there are American companies out there who, starting this year, will be clamoring to pay you to keep your land exactly as it is. The industry is called forest carbon offsets, and companies will pay you in perpetuity to keep all the trees and land exactly how it is. So in short, although this development may be right in purpose, it is certainly in the wrong place. High density residential shoehorned into the only remaining bastion of low density residential is unpalatable enough. But when you jam it in a watershed, we are now left with no choice but to do what's right. And with that, I yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers?
No other speakers.
Okay, so at this time I'll close the public hearing and open it up to council members for questions or comments. But before I do that, I would like to thank all of the speakers who presented comments, all the speakers that were on the line tonight, and those that are watching this process begin. And we are at the beginning of this process. We are given an application for a rezoning, and that application is about the type of use. I think there's a misunderstanding between the type of use and whether development can occur or not. The type of use is what our question is that we have to answer. Development can occur if that property or those properties are annexed. They can develop on day one, or submit permits to develop on day one. So that is the question we will be answering. And the process goes, you have the developer meet with the citizens, which has occurred. You have a public hearing, which we're having tonight. Then that information and other information goes to a citizen advisory board called the Planning and Zoning Board, and they're going to review and make a recommendation to council, and they're going to look at how this fits or does not fit the Cary Community Plan. And the Cary Community Plan was created over 3 years by Cary citizens, not by the council. And it was approved by council about 3 years ago in January 2017. So the staff has looked at the Cary Community Plan. We're going to have citizens look at the Cary Community Plan. We're going to take all this input, all the recommendations. It's going to come back to us in a few months, and at that time, the council will make a decision. Between now and then, you can send emails to council. You can speak at every meeting, and Public Speaks Out. You can contact us in any way you would like. We welcome your comments. We look forward to working with you. If you have questions about the submitted application, I urge you to contact Katie Dry. She's the staff liaison to the citizens and to council, and she will be glad to help you as this moves forward through the process. Having said that, I'm going to open it up to council members for their questions or comments. I'll start with our remote Mayor Pro Tem and see if he has any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just echo your comments and thanking the citizens that have reached out to us to express their concerns. I think that demonstrates how much they care about their community and the environment and the world we live in. And, you know, we all want to leave the world a better place, and then we found it. It is unfortunate that there has been a lot of misinformation spread throughout the community on this one. I hate to see that because it does mess with, well, it's, you know, people are passionate, put it that way. I really want to thank Miss Katie Dry and Matt Flynn for their presentation that I think helps clear up a lot of that misinformation. I applaud the applicant for their willingness to address a number of concerns on the front end, and I hear commitment to further address some of the traffic issues and turning lanes and such as this moves its way through the process. As far as your comments to the type of use, you know, if traffic's a concern, if you know, environmental impacts is a concern, noise is a concern, lights is a concern, I just don't know that there's many uses that you could have that would be better than low density, senior housing. I think it also meets a need in our community. We oftentimes hear from folks who are, aging out of their homes and looking to downsize, looking to get into something smaller. The kids have grown and gone on, or even trying to find their own place to live, and they can't find anything. I think last I heard, on any given month in this town, there's only like 70, 80 houses for sale at any given time. That makes it really hard for folks that have lived here for a really long time to, find a place to live. And so as someone with an elderly parents, my mother, it's trying to find a place for her to go has been incredibly challenging as well. So I do believe this specific use meets a need in our community, and I'll just leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay. Other council members, questions or comments? Ms. Robinson.
Okay. I have questions for Ms. Dry. And while she's coming back, I want to say to staff, I don't want to put a lot of extra work on you, but when we get thick packets such as this one of opposition, it might be helpful for us to be able to see a map that shows where the addresses are that are protesting. In this particular case, we had a lot of protests that are a form letter. So rather than people writing you their unique thoughts, they are signing on to somebody else's writing. So it's just helpful for us to be able to understand, maybe where the form letters are coming from and maybe where the unique letters are coming from. As a person who once sent in petitions into the town, I can say that it is more helpful when we hear unique thoughts versus receiving one letter that's signed by a lot of people. It helps us really assimilate what the sentiment of the community is fully, rather than feeling, well, I don't know how passionate this person was because he or she didn't necessarily want to write a letter. But that aside, that would just help me, staff. Ms. Dry, I have a question for you about the density. In several places it says max 2 units per acre. Is that net or is that gross acreage?
It's gross acreage based on the entire parcel.
Okay, so roughly 76 units then?
That's correct. It would ultimately yield, yes, up to 76 lots.
Okay, I think sometimes it would just be nice if the developer would state that number, rather so that it doesn't make it ambiguous to anyone looking at this. Because when you look at it and you're like, well, gosh, there's 18 acres that's in, watershed that can't even be developed. Someone might interpret that, well, that's not going to be part of that calculation. So it'd be nice if they would also list in their conditions the max units. As far as the percentage, it says in there 80% of the units will be occupied by somebody 55 and older. I'm not sure how the town is going to require that or make sure that's being met over time. A zoning condition is supposed to go on with perpetuity long after the developer sells all of its units. So how are we going to maintain that? And I just don't know if that's necessarily an appropriate condition. I mean, if they don't make it a condition, they can still limit their audience, right? They can still say this is an age-restricted community. It just doesn't have to be legislated by the town.
I know they can restrict it. As far as the legislation piece, I'd ask, turn to Lisa.
And I can speak to that as well, if that's okay.
Oh, sure. Whoever. I know I can't.
Yeah, Lisa, please.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. So that is a zoning condition that we often see for age-restricted housing, and it's based in federal law, which does allow housing communities to restrict based on age. The way the zoning condition is worded, the town would not be responsible for future enforcement. What we would check as they are coming in to build is that they have put restrictive covenants on the land that run with the land in perpetuity and that require that restriction. But ultimately, it would end up being enforced through a homeowners association or some other mechanism. Okay. So the town would not be enforcing it in the future, but we would ensure that they had put that condition on the land as it's being developed.
Why do they stipulate 80%? Why don't they just say it's age restricted?
Law, and that's actually the wording that they end up having to put in their restrictive covenants. It's based in federal law.
Okay, all right, that's very good information.
And can I follow up on that?
Yeah.
So just to be clear, in a homeowner association, their tool for enforcement is a lien on the property.
That's possible. It depends on how they write their covenants, but that's one of them.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The next thing I just want to mention real fast, I mean, right now we've heard from a representative from EPCON, and EPCON is the applicant, pursuing this. I think it was referred to as a fly-by-night developer, Epcot's been developing in Western Cary, in my district, for quite a while. It's excellent housing. However, with that said, I want to address the fact that it's not really a fly-by-night. Fly-by-night's like, somebody comes in, you've never heard of them before, and then they scoot out of town. Epcot's been invested here for quite a while, but it doesn't really matter because our zoning doesn't go with the applicant at all. It goes with the land. And by that, what I mean to the citizens who are watching is that we are asking for zoning conditions to be put on this so that, or I should say the applicants offering zoning conditions to be put on this so that whatever gets built here has to adhere to that, whether it's Epcot or some other builder. And that's why it's important for the citizens to work with the applicant to get those zoning conditions tight, to make sure that they're protecting the land. The last thing I'd like to say is just a general comment. Land is becoming very scarce here in Cary. And when we have busy roads like Holly Springs Road, we look for transitions from the single family, low density, kind of stepping it up in density towards the road. So even though this is 2 units per acre, because 18 of it is set aside, these lots are small, 6,000. That would be in keeping with the kind of practice that we often see, where we have more density up near the road, and it's kind of acts as a buffer. I don't think we would ever receive a lot of applicants who are saying, yeah, let's put in here, 4 units or 6 units or something, large lot units anymore. I think if it's not this, it might be townhomes, it could be commercial, it could be institutional on this busy road, but I don't really see maybe more of the Lockmere-sized yards coming over to here. So just food for thought. So.
Thank you. Other comments?
Well, lately, we've been seeing a lot of dense multifamily projects coming our way with rezonings. And they've all been asking for reductions in buffers and streetscapes and setbacks and parking and you name it. Certainly there's a place for multifamily dense development in town. But to me, it's sort of refreshing to see something like this come along with just 2 units per acre, asking for no reductions, and something as large as 38 acres with just 39 peak trips. That doesn't happen very often. And then it's age restricted to boot, which I think is a great thing. So I have no problem with the what that's being developed. I guess the issue is more of the where, and that's in an environmentally sensitive area. And I guess that's what's generated most of the neighbors' concerns. So I just encourage the applicant to continue to work with them. Perhaps there's some additional modeling that could be done. Perhaps there are some more development standards that could be added. Perhaps nothing can be done. I don't know. I know Mr. Flynn's comments tonight helped me a great deal in understanding things. Perhaps it did also to the neighbors. I would just like to see some of these concerns alleviated before it comes back to us again for a vote.
Thank you, Mr. Yerha. Ms. Liu?
I really appreciate the community's feedback and that we received a lot of comments and letters expressing your concerns, advocating for the environment. And we do all care very much about the environment for this particular development. It does meet the housing demands of our senior population, which I really appreciate. And it is a low density development. And so I'm not too concerned about the impact on the traffic, but I do want more information on the environmental concern that expressed by the community, and I want to make sure before we approve this project, all the environmental concerns and should be addressed, that the development should comply with all the environmental regulations we have in place. And perhaps I would encourage our staff to provide more information and look at the surrounding areas. It is a very environmentally sensitive area, and some homes were built before we had the environmental regulations in place, so they were probably too close to the watershed, and some homes do have the flooding and stormwater issues. So perhaps, there is something that the town can do to address the homes that have flooding and stormwater issues. And we did see some pictures that the citizens sent in. So I want to make sure that before we vote on this project, we have all the information we need, and all the environmental concerns should be addressed thoroughly.
Thank you, Ms. Liu. Mr. Smith, you and I live like a mile from there. So you know this area very well. Would you like to give us your comment?
Yeah. First of all, is there a way to go to the slide that was near the beginning where it showed the environmental impact? There was quite a lot of green in Maitland Drive. That's the slide I'm asking for, Katie.
I believe that's slide number 32.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, that looks.
There you go.
There you go, 32. I should have wrote that down. My apologies. Yeah, I was surprised that this was coming back, and I won't repeat all the things that all my peers said. All of those have strong merit. When I looked at the list that were on the what do you call it, the virtual thing, I don't know what they call those things, but I was surprised at some of the names. I've called some, and there were some interesting observations. One, my question would be dealing with the environment and drainage and all of that. As you can see, half of Maitland Drive and a few of the homes in Whisperwood are just chronic. I'm assuming I didn't match the pictures to the names, but I assume a lot of those pictures are from that area. I'd like to see, we pride ourselves in not making the situation worse. And we've heard good numbers, how we're going to do that and all of the above. But I'd like some more feedback on what's being promised, and will this development not just keep things the same, because keeping it the same is bad. Those homes in Lockmere are being impacted quite a bit, and with the rainy season we've had the past 2 years, it's been exacerbated. So I'd just like to have a better understanding of the criteria that's being imposed on this site or being offered by this site. Does it really make a difference? That's all. Does it really make a difference? Statistically, it might, but I kind of like a little more assurance that between this development coming, which you could make an argument is needed, and is the town committed to maybe helping with that state property where we might be able to do some things. I don't know what that is, but I think this is an opportunity to look into that, to see if in fact we're going to approve an annexation that even though it's low density, it isn't viewed that way by the people that live in the county. I'd just like a little bit more feedback of what we can do on Maitland Drive, and by inference, Whisperwood. Don't know if anything can be done or not. The bigger surprise to me today was talking to people about traffic. We've been kind of lulled into this 33, again, we're back to data, 33 trips a day at the peak and all of that. But there's just kind of a built-up frustration that because the traffic on Holly Springs is so bad, even though when you talk to people, they recognize it's not our problem. So, it's almost like the analogy that was given to me is the water glass is full, and just one drop, even though it's only one drop, continues to make it spill over. Oops. And it's a problem. And in talking to some people, it got me thinking that, the old grandma, be careful what you wish for. The more improvements you make, the more you encourage cut-through traffic. And it's like, that's one of the fears that I heard from some of the people. And you heard the speaker at Public Speaks Out, Mr. Souville, say the concern about traffic being directed through, and now we build up the traffic on Lockmere Drive and the cut-through traffic. So some questions I would have that don't need to be answered tonight is, there might be, are we allowed, or can we work with DOT to restrict left turns? I mean, if you've got people coming off of Holly Springs and they see Lily Atkins improved and they're making left turns to cut through, you know, that might be an unintended consequence we don't want. You know, maybe what we want is no left turns there and people go up to the light where you're staying on the main roads instead of fostering cut-through traffic. I see that they're adding an extra entrance into it. You know, maybe that's where there's a left turn, because whoever turns left there would not be meandering through a development to use as a cut-through. You know, in my mind, I don't know if it's legal or not, but in my mind, anything that reduces left turn lanes into Lily Atkins from Holly Springs, you know, to me, is a safety issue and would be well thought out. And at the same time, as we look at what are the traffic requirements we want, I think we should be looking at creative ways that would help this development, but not foster where strangers and volumes and thousands of cars see a new, easy way. Just look at all the challenges we've had with Lockmere Highlands, you know, where it has become like the new, easy way to cut through and get off of the main road. So where I'm going with this is I would really like to see some extra thought from our staff, and maybe, I'm not sure what the applicant do, but I think it's time for us as a town to step up, and if we're going to consider this application, that we look at ways of maybe in concert with that application, we look at ways that we can kind of improve on this cancer that's over there. I don't know if that made any sense, but you know, the point is traffic is bigger than I think it's been. It's been minimized here because it's only 33 units. I think it's bigger than that. And I think it ought to be addressed. And I think that on the back end, and finally, you know, just one last thought. I did see some that said, we want to see the state keep that property. Well, I got news for you, whoever said that. I didn't read all the names. But I guarantee you, I'll sell my home if you want, but I guarantee you, if we're managing that property and we're using it in concert with the improvements we're trying to do in stormwater and protecting that community, you're going to want to see us have that land than a third party that isn't really paying attention, hasn't really given much of any monies to improve the Holly Springs Road and all the other things that are going out there. Now, we can't solve the illnesses that come from other entities that aren't doing their job. But I do hope and I do appeal that we try to do just a little bit more here in concert with this application as it goes through. Or if, you know, if I'm just not comfortable that those things are being improved, then I'm going to think long and hard on this one. I mean, I welcome it going through and I encourage feedback, but let's keep the feedback real. Let's not make it personal. And for those who may think I'm tone deaf, I do have new hearing aids, so hopefully I'll be a little bit more tolerant in listening to you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. And just to follow up, since we're asking for more information, you just generated another thought for me. Being on Campo, I can't remember Holly Springs improvements on there for the next spot, which means 10 years. And if staff could confirm that one way or another, maybe I missed it. Maybe there's a section coming, but I didn't see anything. At least I don't remember anything.
Yeah, I don't remember anything either, but I will say, you know, in my district, Jack, over in coming out of Preston, we had a creek that was flooding the Rigsby Farm neighborhood. I don't know if you remember this because it's been now 15 years or so. But when the developer went to go develop what is now Stone Creek Shopping Center, we said to him, we want you to improve, we don't care about the density that you put in here, as long as you can improve the conditions of flooding. And he actually went in and made the situation better with his development so that it alleviated the flooding problem in the Rigsby Farm neighborhood. And he did that in concert with the town, working with the town. But I don't think it's outside the realm of possible to have, between the applicant and the town, to help, improve the condition down there. As far as the traffic goes, it seems to me like if you restrict you're saying left into the neighborhood? From
Left into Lily Atkins from Holly Springs.
Well, the only question I have is, wouldn't that hurt all the people who actually live there and drive down towards Holly Springs to go to the Walgreens down there and the other stuff that's down there?
Well, that's really the conundrum. That's the dilemma. If you do that to fix one problem, you create a new one, because then they're now going through Lockmere, which is what Lockmere is most concerned about.
Yeah.
I understand that, but you're talking about 7 homes having that problem where they get out safely. All you have to do is look at the accident records trying to make a left on Holly Springs during a busy time.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's the solution. I'm bringing it up as an example. What I want are the traffic professionals to look at that, but to really keep in mind, what can we do that helps the egress-ingress at Holly Springs Road, and what is the impact of that new cut-through for the development that might help the situation, and what do we do to address those other concerns? But you're absolutely right. What the choice would be, or the dilemma would be, is it 20 homes that have to go an extra step or two to get out safely, or do we just allow the floodgates open on Holly Springs where it continues to flow through onto Lockmere Drive and other places? I don't know the answer. But I think the noise we're hearing, the passion we're hearing, the concern we're hearing, the development is almost just the excuse. What's happening is it's been built up because of the inattention to Holly Springs, inattention to the wetlands by our state, inattention to other communities in the area that are building without the high standards we have. All of that is happening right there. And so I think the frustration is coming out on these acres and this one thing. So all we can do is peel away the layers of the things we can do. We can make sure it's a quality development. We can make sure that it's built to the highest standards, and we can hopefully address in a more aggressive way some of the stormwater runoff issues that are affecting, in particular, Maiden Drive and Whisperwood. But, and maybe there's just things we can do in concert, where we don't just throw it all on the back of somebody that wants to invest in Cary, that developer. But we send a message that we are listening, that this is a vulnerable area that has been a vulnerable area for a long time. And I don't know where we go with this. There's not, in essence, there's a danger when you pursue perfect, the old analogy to that. But I think that what I'd rather see is an opportunity. The voices are being heard again, and we've got a developer through, 8 months of neighborhood meetings has done a lot. But I also think it's time for us to do a little bit also. And I don't know what all of that means, but wouldn't it be better if we can find some way to just make this product a little bit better with it, and have the developer step up? For example, I really like to understand legally just what can be said about age restricted. That was a real eye opener when you brought it up, Ms. Jennifer, and you talked about only 80%, and some can be. It's either age restricted or it's not, in my mind. And I need a better understanding of why it's worded that way, because I really think that almost, for people that don't trust, that almost looks like weasel words that we're trying to work around. We're hiding under age restricted, but we really want more than that. And I'm not saying that's happening, but I'm just saying when people don't have trust, and we've lost trust, and the anger that's been out there for many years on other failed opportunities out there, or developments from other groups, we as Cary have a way to show some leadership now. At least I hope so.
Other comments? All right, this will go to our Planning and Zoning Board next. And again, I remind everyone that you can always contact us and always speak at a council meeting between now and the time we vote on this project. Thank you, Ms. Dry. Thank you, Mr. Flynn, for helping with this. We now move to our second public hearing, 20A08, Rocco LLC Long Beverage Annexation. Principal Planner Katie Dry will once again introduce the item, and council will not take action on this tonight. Instead, it will be referred to the Planning and Zoning Board and returned to us at a future date. Ms. Dry.
This is a public hearing on an owner-initiated annexation for properties located at World Trade Boulevard, Page Road, and Airport Road. The properties are a proposed annexation that includes land within both Wake County and Durham County. The portion of Cary's existing corporate limits in this area, shown here are in gold. They're adjacent to two jurisdictions. The City of Raleigh's corporate limits are shown here in blue, and the City of Durham's limits are in green. You can also see on the map that the boundary between Wake and Durham counties also serves as the border for the existing annexation and utility agreements between Cary and Durham. The agreements authorize Cary and the City of Durham managers, upon agreement in writing, to permit an exception to the agreement and will allow either municipality to consider a request to annex and provide utilities across the boundary within the other jurisdiction's area, and upon written agreement of the manager for Cary and the City of Durham. And in December of 2020, the two managers signed an agreement permitting Cary to annex the subject area outlined in red and serve it with utilities, which is being requested by the property owner, as it is adjacent to existing development in Cary and therefore more efficiently served by Cary utilities and more appropriate for annexation into Cary. The area requested for annexation is approximately 5.3 acres. The request is associated with the proposed expansion of the existing Long Beverage business already located in Cary's corporate limits, adjacent to the east of the site. And since a majority of the annexation is not in Cary's ETJ, a Cary zoning and a future land use designation must also be established as part of annexing the property. As you may recall, the public hearing on the associated rezoning and comprehensive plan amendment was held at council on January 14th. This case was forwarded to the Planning and Zoning Board for a staff recommendation on consistency with the Cary Community Plan. Staff recommends that following tonight's public hearing, action on the annexation be deferred so that it may be considered concurrently with the associated rezoning when it returns for your final consideration. And before you open the hearing, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to take a moment to provide council with some additional information about this area in response to a question Councilmember Robinson asked of staff during the public hearing for the rezoning. From this map, you can see there's a sliver of land to the south, which is also located in Durham County. That area is actually part of a larger property outlined in yellow. It lies within both Wake County and Durham counties, similar to Long Beverage's property. Most of the property is within Wake County and within Cary's ETJ in corporate limits. The exception to the annexation agreement associated with Long Beverage's request was prompted by providing utility services in the most efficient and practical way to the proposed expansion of the existing business already in Cary. And that was the first time since the annexation agreement was last updated by Cary and Durham back in 2009, and additional exceptions can also be considered if agreed upon by both managers, as the property in this area develops and specific sites on either side of the boundary are looked at more closely during the design stages, with respect to being served by water and sewer utilities. This concludes the staff's presentation. Following the public hearing, staff is available to answer questions. I'd also like to note that the applicant's representative, Jason Barron, will be available to answer questions as well following the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dry. Now's time for the public hearing for 20A08, the Long Beverage annexation, and I'll check with the town clerk, see if we have any callers on the line or if we had any information beforehand.
No submitted comments nor callers.
Okay, very good. I'll close the public hearing, open it up to council members for questions or comments. As was mentioned by Ms. Dry, we'll see this along with the rezoning request at a future date. Thank you, Ms. Dry.
Thank you.
We now move to our third public hearing, 20A09 Cohen is 6012 Farm Pond Road annexation. Assistant Planning Director Deborah Grannon will introduce the item. Council will not take action tonight, and it'll be referred to our Planning and Zoning Board and will return to us at a future date. Ms. Grannon.
Mayor, good evening, Council. This is a public hearing for an owner-initiated annexation petition for 5.3 acres of property located at 6012 Farm Pond Road. It's approximately 400 feet west of the intersection with Davis Drive. The property is located contiguous to Cary's corporate limits, but it's outside Cary's ETJ and has a Wake County zoning designation of Residential 40 watershed. The property is developed with a detached residential dwelling, and the property owner wishes to connect to Cary water service. So in accordance with Cary regulations, before a site can connect to utilities, it's necessary to first bring the property into Cary's corporate limits. Since the property is outside Cary's ETJ, a zoning designation must also be established as part of the annexation process. The owner has submitted a rezoning application in conjunction with this petition, requesting Cary zoning of Residential 40. You may recall we presented the public hearing on that associated rezoning to you on January 14th, and the case was forwarded to the Planning and Zoning Board for their review. Following the public hearing, no action by council is needed this evening. The annexation request will be placed on a future council meeting agenda so that action may coincide with the final action on the associated rezoning request. This concludes staff's presentation. Please let me know, or please let the applicant know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Grannon. Now's the time for a public hearing for 20A09 6012 Farm Pond Road annexation. I'll once again check with the clerk to see if we've had any comments before or if we have anyone on the line.
No submitted comments and no one on the line.
All right, very good. We'll close the public hearing. And as Ms. Grannon mentioned, it'll come back to council along with the rezoning request, and we'll make a decision at that time. We now move to our last public hearing. It's Act 16 Joint Chatham-Cary Land Use Plan Amendment. And once again, Assistant Planning Director Deborah Grannon will introduce the item. Council will not take action on this rezoning this evening, but it will be referred to our Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation and return to us at a future meeting. Ms. Grannon.
Thank you. This is a rezoning request for an amendment. I'm sorry, not a rezoning request. This is a comprehensive plan amendment request.
I think
for
I said
property
that
located.
and confused you. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Not a problem. It's been a long day. This is property located at 9245 NC 751 Highway at the intersection with O'Kelly Chapel Road. The joint plan, as you recall, was adopted in 2012 after several years of review and meetings. It included the plan you see here and an interlocal agreement and a plan document, both attached to your staff report, which specified how future amendments were to be processed. This parcel is located entirely in Chatham County. However, in accordance with that interlocal agreement, both Chatham County and Cary must approve the request before the property may be annexed. The property is comprised of a 2-acre parcel. It's located west of the intersection with O'Kelly Chapel Road, and it's just south of the border between Chatham County and Durham County. And this slide is just to give you a little perspective on how far away this is. It's located approximately 3 miles west of NC 55 Highway and about 2.5 miles from the closest Cary corporate limits. The current designation of the property is very low density residential, and the applicant has proposed an amendment to commercial retail, which is consistent with the immediately adjacent property located to the south and west of the site. And in regard to that adjacent property, that is the location of For Garden's Sake, a landscape and garden supply business, which is owned by the applicant, Mr. Scott Pierce. Mr. Pierce also owns the subject 2-acre parcel, which is the site of the historic O'Kelly Chapel. The chapel was decommissioned in 2018 and purchased by Mr. Pierce that same year. As indicated in his application, Mr. Pierce has expressed an interest in expanding his garden center and possibly using this old chapel as an amenity site or an event facility. Rezoning to a commercial use would be necessary for that to occur, and the land use plan amendment would be needed in order for that rezoning request to be found in compliance. The proposed amendment has been through a complete review with the Chatham County offices. A public hearing was held before the Board of Commissioners last November, a second public hearing before their Planning and Zoning Board in December, where it was recommended for approval unanimously. Then it was approved by the Board of Commissioners on January 19th. There were no public comments at any of these public meetings. So following tonight's public hearing, it will go to our Planning and Zoning Board for a recommendation and then back to you for final action. Regarding the criteria used to consider an amendment to a comprehensive plan, staff observes that since the chapel was decommissioned and considering the applicant's expressed interest in developing the property for a commercial use, that item 2 applies. The identification of new issues, needs, or opportunities not adequately addressed by the comprehensive plan. This concludes staff's presentation. The applicant, Mr. Scott Pierce, is on the line to offer his comments on the request, and then following the public hearing, he and I will both be available for your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Grannon. Mr. Pierce, please proceed.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Nothing really big to add here. Just want to thank you all for your time tonight. I appreciate you hearing this out and this initial step in the process with the town of Cary. The only thing I would say is that, of course, for us, the big focus here is trying to find a way to put this building, which has been there since 1900, pretty cool, put it back into use. And so being able to take this initial step with the joint plan and eventually seek a rezoning with Chatham would allow us to use it in conjunction with what we're currently doing at the Garden Center. And as Deborah mentioned, possibly be able to hold some events. It'd be something that the community can see put back in use. And that's really kind of what we're most excited about with the potential for this. And again, I just appreciate that. And I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any. Thank you.
Thank you. So now's the time for the public hearing for Act 16 Joint Chatham-Cary Land Use Plan Amendment. And I'll check with the town clerk to see if we have any callers or anyone submit comments.
No comments, no call-ins.
All right, I'll close the public hearing, open it up to council members for questions or comments.
No, I think it's a good use to be able to incorporate this with the For Garden's Sake property and hopefully use that building. It's a beautiful building. I've often wondered about that. I didn't think a church still met there. I guess, is there any provision in Chatham County that would restrict it from being torn down? I mean, I'm not thinking that the owner of Garden's Sake would, but once it gets moved to commercial retail, then kind of anything could go, right? Unless they have some conditions.
Right.
I'm just curious.
Ms. Grannon, do you know the answer to that question?
It would be up to Chatham County and up to the applicant, Mr. Pierce, if he wished to offer zoning conditions about the preservation of the building. So that may be something that he considers. It would have to go through a rezoning and then obviously have to go through an inspections and permits review if the use was changed on the property for commercial use.
Thank you.
But I think as far as the comprehensive plan goes, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I think of you when I see that plan. You worked on that for many, many years.
Yeah, it took a long time.
That was painful. Other questions or comments from council members? Okay, as was mentioned earlier, it will go to our Planning and Zoning Board and will come back to us at a future date. That concludes our agenda. Are there any other items for consideration this evening? If not, meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.